Hello and welcome. Get comfortable, settle into your favorite spot, and prepare yourself for a journey through one of gaming's most intricate and philosophically rich worlds. Tonight, we're going to explore the Elden Ring, its many possible endings, and the profound implications of each path you might choose as the Tarnished. This is a space for relaxation, contemplation, and deep immersion into the lore that has captivated millions. The beauty of Elden Ring's narrative lies not in simple answers or clear moral guidelines, but in the questions it poses and the weight it places upon your shoulders. Each ending represents not merely a conclusion to your personal journey, but a fundamental choice about the nature of existence itself, about who should wield power, and whether the cycles of suffering that have defined this world can ever truly be broken. As we move through this exploration together, let the words wash over you. There's no need to memorize every detail or fully grasp every philosophical implication on first hearing. The lands between reveal their secrets slowly, in layers, much like peeling back the bark of the Erdtree itself to discover what lies beneath. Some of you may drift off to sleep during our journey, and that's perfectly fine. The lore will be here when you return, patient and eternal, as the grace that guides the Tarnished. From Software has crafted something truly special with Elden Ring. Building upon the narrative techniques they perfected in the Dark Souls series and Bloodborne, they've created a world where the story is told not through lengthy cutscenes or exposition dumps, but through environmental details, item descriptions, and the careful piecing together of fragments scattered across a vast landscape. This approach to storytelling respects the intelligence of the player, trusting you to engage actively with the narrative rather than passively receiving it. The world of Elden Ring is one of faded glory and shattered divinity. The Erdtree, that massive golden beacon visible from nearly every corner of the lands between, stands as a symbol of both promise and decay. It represents the cosmic order established by Queen Marika the Eternal, a system that brought stability and structure to a chaotic world, but at costs that become increasingly apparent the deeper you delve into the game's lore. The Elden Ring itself, the source of all cosmic lore and the foundation of reality in this world, has been shattered. With its breaking came the fracturing of certainty itself. Death, which had been bound and controlled, began to behave unpredictably. The demigods, children of Queen Marika, went to war with one another in a conflict called the Shattering, each seeking to claim the shards of the Elden Ring and become the new lord of this broken realm. Into this chaos come the Tarnished, exiles who were once stripped of the Erdtree's grace and banished from the lands between. You are one of these Tarnished, called back to the realm by the guidance of grace itself, tasked with claiming the great runes held by the demigods, entering the Erdtree, and becoming Elden Lord. It's a simple goal on its surface, but the journey to achieve it will force you to confront profound questions about the nature of power, the legitimacy of divine rule, and what you truly want the world to become. The release of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion has added crucial new context to everything we thought we understood about this world. The DLC takes us to the Land of Shadow, a realm sealed away by Queen Marika herself, where the violent history that preceded the Golden Order has been hidden but not forgotten. Here we learn about Miquella the Kind, perhaps the most tragic figure in all of Elden Ring's pantheon, and about the cycles of persecution and revenge that stretch back through generations. What makes Elden Ring's multiple endings so compelling is that they're not simply good or bad choices, but genuine philosophical positions with their own internal logic and appeal. The game presents you with fundamentally different visions of what the world should become, each with its own benefits and costs, and refuses to tell you which is objectively correct. This moral ambiguity might be frustrating for those seeking clear guidance, but it's also what makes the choice meaningful. Throughout this journey, we'll examine each ending in detail, considering not just what happens in the final moments, but what each choice means for the future of the lands between. We'll explore the questlines that lead to these endings, the characters whose philosophies shape them, and the broader implications for themes of power, identity, freedom, and responsibility that run throughout the game. The structure of our exploration will move from the most straightforward ending to the most radical, beginning with the Age of Fracture and progressing through various attempts at reform, revolution, and ultimately destruction. Along the way, we'll consider how the revelations of Shadow of the Erdtree recontextualize these choices, adding layers of meaning that weren't apparent in the base game alone. Before we begin our detailed examination of each ending, it's worth taking a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship that went into creating this narrative structure. From Software could have easily created a single canonical ending and called it sufficient. Instead, they invested the resources necessary to develop 6 distinct conclusions for the base game, each with its own unique cinematic, dialogue, and implications. This commitment to providing meaningful choice reflects a deep respect for player agency and the value of multiple perspectives. The fact that no ending feels tacked on or incomplete further demonstrates this commitment. Each conclusion has been given the same level of narrative weight and philosophical depth, suggesting that the developers genuinely wanted players to engage with these different worldviews rather than simply providing the illusion of choice while guiding everyone toward a single correct outcome. As we prepare to dive deep into the lore, remember that there's no wrong way to engage with this material. You might choose an ending based on its philosophical appeal, or because you connected with a particular character's questline, or simply because the aesthetic of a certain conclusion resonated with you. All of these are valid reasons, and part of what makes Elden Ring's narrative so rich is that it can be appreciated on multiple levels simultaneously. The world of the lands between is vast and filled with secrets. Even after hundreds of hours of play, dedicated lore enthusiasts continue to discover new connections, hidden meanings, and subtle implications in item descriptions and environmental details. This depth ensures that each return to the game, whether for a new playthrough or simply for contemplation, can reveal something previously missed. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let's begin our journey through the Shattered Realm. We'll walk together through golden fields and darkened dungeons, scale the peaks of mountains and descend into forgotten depths, all in pursuit of understanding what it truly means to claim the title of Elden Lord, and what kind of world you want to create when you finally sit upon that throne beneath the Erdtree, or choose to abandon it entirely for something else. The lands between await, patient and eternal, ready to reveal their secrets to those willing to listen. Let us begin. Before we can fully appreciate the significance of Elden Ring's various endings, we must first understand the world that brings us to that crucial moment of choice. The lands between exist in a state of profound crisis, a realm where the cosmic order has shattered, and the certainties that once governed existence have dissolved into chaos and conflict. The history of this world is one of cycles, of power changing hands through violence, of victims becoming victimizers, and of divine authority built upon foundations of suffering that its rulers would prefer remain hidden. To understand where we might go, we must first understand where we've been and how we arrived at this moment of crisis. The Golden Order, established by Queen Marika the Eternal, represented the dominant paradigm of existence in the lands between for an age. This was a system of cosmic law backed by divine authority, where the Erdtree served as both symbol and substance of Marika's power. Under this order, death itself was bound and controlled, with souls returning to the tree, rather than passing on to whatever might lie beyond. Life was structured according to hierarchies determined by grace, with those touched by the golden light of the Erdtree enjoying privileges and status denied to others. Queen Marika stands at the center of this entire narrative, a figure of immense power and profound tragedy. She appears throughout the game as a statue, a corpse, a presence felt but never truly encountered in her living, active form. Her body hangs broken within the Erdtree, shattered alongside the Elden Ring itself in the catastrophic event that precipitated the world's current crisis. Yet despite her apparent absence, Marika's influence permeates every aspect of the lands between. The shattering of the Elden Ring was no accident. Marika herself, for reasons that remain somewhat mysterious even after extensive exploration of the game's lore, chose to break the very source of cosmic law that had elevated her to godhood. This act of divine rebellion or self-destruction threw the world into chaos, stripped her children of their unified purpose, and set demigod against demigod in a devastating war for the fragments of power that remained. Why would a goddess destroy the foundation of her own authority? The answer to this question touches upon themes of imprisonment, the corruption of power, and the terrible costs of maintaining divine rule. Marika, we learn through careful study of the game's lore and especially through the revelations of Shadow of the Erdtree, was not always a goddess. She began as something else, something more vulnerable, and her ascension to divinity came through paths marked by violence and trauma. The Golden Order that Marika established was not the first attempt at organizing cosmic law in the lands between. Before the Erdtree stood another great tree, one that was burned away to make room for the current divine structure. Before Marika's reign, other civilizations flourished and fell. The Land of Shadow, explored in the DLC, preserves evidence of these earlier eras, including the civilization of the Hornsent, who preceded Marika's rise to power. This history of succession through destruction is crucial to understanding the world's current state. The lands between have never known lasting peace or permanent order. Instead, they've experienced a series of cosmic regimes, each claiming to represent ultimate truth and eternal authority, each eventually falling to internal contradictions or external challenges. The current crisis, the shattering, and its aftermath, represents simply the latest iteration of this pattern. The demigods, Marika's children and stepchildren, each represent different aspects of her power and different responses to the world's fundamental problems. Godwyn the Golden, before his death, embodied the noble ideal of the Golden Order, a prince beloved by all who seemed to represent the best possibilities of Marika's reign. His assassination, the first murder in a land where death had been bound, marked the beginning of the end for the Golden Order's stability. Malenia the Severed, cursed with scarlet rot from birth, represents the persistence of ancient forces that even Marika's power could not fully control. Her brother Miquella, whose story becomes central in Shadow of the Erdtree, sought to cure his sister's affliction and create a gentler world, but found that even the most compassionate intentions can become tyrannical when backed by sufficient power. Raiden, the Star Scourge, held back the very stars themselves, preventing fate from unfolding as it otherwise might. Rykard, the Blasphemous, fed himself to a great serpent in pursuit of power that could challenge the gods themselves. Mohg, the Lord of Blood, sought to establish a new dynasty built upon blood and ritual. Each demigod pursued their own vision of what the world should become, and the shattering was the result of these visions coming into violent conflict. The Tarnished, into which category you fall, represent yet another aspect of this complex history. These are individuals who once lived in the lands between under the grace of the Erdtree, but who were at some point stripped of that grace and exiled from the realm. The reasons for this exile remain somewhat mysterious, but the fact of it is crucial. The Tarnished are beings who have experienced both acceptance and rejection by the divine order, who understand what it means to be blessed and what it means to be cast out. Now, after an indeterminate period of exile, the Tarnished are being called back. Grace, which had been withdrawn, is being offered again, guiding these exiles toward the Erdtree with the promise that one among them might claim the title of Elden Lord and restore order to the shattered realm. This recall is not random but purposeful, suggesting that the greater will, the cosmic force that stands above even Marika, has some plan or intention for these returning exiles. The greater will itself remains one of the most mysterious elements of Elden Ring's cosmology. This entity, which appears to be the source of the Elden Ring and the ultimate authority behind the Golden Order, communicates through intermediaries like the Two Fingers, and makes its will known through the granting or withdrawing of grace. Yet its actual nature, intentions, and limitations remain largely opaque. Is it truly a benevolent cosmic force seeking the good of all beings, or simply another form of power seeking to perpetuate its own dominance? The world you explore as the Tarnished bears the scars of the shattering everywhere you look. Castles lie in ruins, great warriors have been reduced to shadows of their former glory, and the very landscape seems broken and fragmented. The Erdtree itself, while still standing and still radiating its golden light, is thorned and sealed, barring entry to all who approach. The grace that once guided people toward clear purposes now points the Tarnished toward conflict with the demigods who hold the great runes. Throughout the lands between, you encounter various factions and individuals, each with their own understanding of what went wrong and what might be done to fix it. Some, like the Prophet Corin, believe that the Golden Order can be perfected through scholarship and the refinement of its principles. Others, like the Volcano Manor rebels, believe that the entire system must be overthrown through violence. Still others, like Ranni the Witch, pursue their own agendas that exist largely outside the framework of the Golden Order entirely. The state of death in this world deserves particular attention as it's central to several of the game's endings. Under the Golden Order, death as a natural process was largely eliminated. Souls of those who died in grace returned to the Erdtree, where they could potentially be reborn or at least preserved in some form. This was seen as a blessing, a triumph over the cruel inevitability of mortality. However, this disruption of natural cycles created its own problems. Those who lived in death, the undead and skeleton warriors you encounter throughout the game, became abominations to be destroyed rather than natural parts of the world's ecosystem. The sealing away of destined death, the rune that governed mortality, was accomplished by Marika through the agency of her shadow, Malekith. This act fundamentally altered the nature of existence in the lands between, creating a world where the normal cycles of life and death no longer functioned as they might in other realms. The consequences of this alteration ripple through the entire narrative and provide the foundation for multiple possible endings. The geography of the lands between itself tells a story of divine intervention and cosmic conflict. The underground realms, like Siofra River and the Lake of Rot, suggest ancient civilizations that predate the current surface world. The mountaintops of the giants preserve evidence of a war between Marika and the fire giants, a conflict that ended with the near extinction of an entire race. Every region you explore contains layers of history, evidence of previous conflicts and earlier attempts at imposing order upon chaos. As you journey toward the Erdtree, guided by grace, you're not simply moving through space but through these layers of history as well. Each boss you defeat, each dungeon you explore, each item description you read adds another piece to the puzzle of understanding how the world reached its current state and what possibilities exist for its future. The game never forces this understanding upon you. You must actively seek it out, assembling fragments of knowledge into a coherent picture through your own effort and attention. The role of the fingers in this cosmology deserves special mention, as they represent the primary way that cosmic forces interact with mortal beings. The two fingers serve as interpreters of the greater will, providing guidance to those who would restore the Golden Order. Yet their interpretation may not be infallible, and their understanding of the greater will's intentions may be incomplete or even mistaken. The existence of the three fingers, which advocate for the complete destruction of the current order, suggests that the cosmos may contain conflicting forces or multiple possible paths forward. By the time you reach the moment of choosing an ending, you've traveled from one end of the lands between to the other. You've defeated demigods and dragons, explored underground cities and skybound fortresses, witnessed the remnants of lost civilizations and the struggles of current inhabitants trying to survive in a broken world. The choice you make at the foot of the Erdtree represents not just your personal preference, but your response to everything you've seen and learned. The world stands poised between multiple possible futures. The fragments of the Elden Ring have been gathered, the path to the Erdtree has been opened through fire and sacrifice, and the power to reshape reality itself lies within reach. What remains is the choice of what to do with that power, what kind of world to create from the ruins of the old one, and whether any choice can truly break the cycles of violence and oppression that have characterized every previous cosmic order. This is the context in which Elden Ring's 6 endings must be understood. Each represents not just a different outcome, but a different philosophy about power, order, freedom, and the fundamental nature of existence. As we move forward to examine each ending in detail, keep in mind this rich history and complex present state. The choice is never simple because the problems are never simple, and any solution that seems perfect probably hasn't been examined closely enough. The Age of Fracture stands as the default ending of Elden Ring, the conclusion that the game naturally guides you toward if you simply follow the golden light of grace and complete the main narrative thread without pursuing any of the optional questlines that lead to alternative outcomes. This ending sees the Tarnished repair the Elden Ring and ascend to become Elden Lord, sitting upon the throne beneath the restored Erdtree. It is, in many ways, the most straightforward conclusion, but straightforward should not be confused with simple. To achieve this ending, you must walk the path that Melina lays out before you from the beginning of your journey. You gather the great runes from the demigods who claimed them after the shattering, defeating Godric in his castle, Rennala in her academy, and eventually the remaining shard-bearers who stand between you and the Erdtree. You must defeat Morgoth the Grace-Given in the capital of Lendel, discover that the Erdtree remains sealed even after claiming all necessary runes, and then embark on the tragic quest to burn the tree using the flame of ruin preserved by the fire giant. This burning requires Melina's sacrifice. Throughout your journey, she has served as your guide, your companion in spirit if not always in body, interpreting the guidance of grace and helping you understand your purpose. At the Forge of the Giants, she offers herself as kindling for the flame that can burn the thorns sealing the Erdtree. It's a moment of profound sacrifice, one that underscores the cost of even this default ending. Nothing in the lands between comes without price, and the restoration of the Golden Order requires the death of one who believed in its promise. After burning the tree and traversing the crumbling ruins of Farum Azula, where time itself seems to flow differently, you face the final guardians of the Old Order. First comes Godfrey, Marika's first Elden Lord, returned in your final hour as one last test. Then, having proven yourself against the greatest warrior the Golden Order ever produced, you face Radagon and the Elden Beast, the divine essences that lie at the heart of the Erdtree itself. The revelation that Radagon and Marika are one and the same being, that the god who shattered the Elden Ring and the champion who sought to repair it were two aspects of a single divided entity, adds layers of tragedy and complexity to this final confrontation. You fight not just against an external enemy, but against the internal contradictions of divinity itself, against a being who embodied both rebellion against cosmic law and desperate attempts to restore it. When you finally emerge victorious and approach the shattered statue of Marika, you have the option to simply repair the Elden Ring without any modifications. Touch the fracture, mend what was broken, and claim your throne as Elden Lord. The cinematic that follows shows you seated in glory, the Erdtree restored to its golden radiance, with the narrator speaking of how the fallen leaves tell a story of how a tarnished became Elden Lord. On the surface, this appears to be a happy ending, a healing of the great wound that was the shattering. The tarnished has succeeded where the demigods failed, gathering the great runes and reforging them into a functioning whole. Order has been restored, the chaos ended, and presumably, life can return to some approximation of normalcy. The golden light of the Erdtree shines once more, grace guides the faithful, and divine authority stands firmly established. Yet the very name, Age of Fracture, suggests that this restoration is not as complete as it might appear. Fracture implies cracks, breaks, visible seams where things were broken and then put back together. This is not a pristine new beginning, but a repair job, however skilled. The problems that led to the shattering in the first place, whatever drove Marika to destroy the source of her own power, have not necessarily been addressed by simply gluing the pieces back together. Consider what the Golden Order actually was before the shattering. It was a system that bound death itself, preventing the natural cycle of mortality from functioning as it should. It was an order that persecuted omens, beings born with horns who were seen as cursed and unclean, despite having committed no crime beyond their manner of birth. It was a regime that marginalized the misbegotten, the Albinaurics, and numerous other forms of life that didn't fit neatly into its narrow definition of worthy existence. The Golden Order waged wars of extermination against those who threatened its supremacy. The fire giants were nearly wiped out to prevent them from ever again burning the Erdtree. The dragons were subjugated, their lord Placidusax left to wait eternally for the return of a god who abandoned him. The ancient dynasty of Farum Azula was left to crumble outside of normal time. All of this violence, all of this suffering, was done in service of maintaining the Golden Order's authority. By choosing the Age of Fracture, you are choosing to restore this system. You become Elden Lord much as Godfrey did before you, much as Radagon did in his turn. You sit upon the same throne, beneath the same tree, upholding the same basic structure of cosmic law. The specific person wielding power has changed, but the nature of that power and the system through which it operates remains fundamentally the same. There is comfort in this, to be fair. The Golden Order, for all its flaws, did provide stability for many people. It created a framework within which civilization could flourish, where people could live their lives with some degree of predictability and protection. The alternative to order is not necessarily freedom but chaos, and chaos can be far more destructive than even an unjust order. By restoring the Erdtree's power, you prevent the complete collapse of civilization that might otherwise occur. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC adds crucial context to this choice by revealing the violent history upon which the Golden Order was built. We learn that Marika's people, the shamans, were persecuted and tortured by the Hornsent civilization that preceded the Golden Order. The Hornsent practiced rituals involving the melding of different forms of life, and the shamans' unique properties made them particularly valuable and vulnerable for these horrific practices. When Marika achieved godhood, she did not break this cycle of persecution and revenge. Instead, she launched her own crusade against the Hornsent, systematically destroying their civilization in an act of divine vengeance. Messmer the Impaler, her son, was left in the Land of Shadow to carry out this work, condemned to exist as an instrument of his mother's revenge while bearing the moral weight of the atrocities he committed. Understanding this history transforms how we view the Age of Fracture. You are not simply restoring an abstract order, but specifically restoring a system built upon these foundations of violence and revenge. The Golden Order that you re-establish is the same order that perpetuated cycles of persecution, that waged wars of extermination, that built its golden facade upon hidden suffering. Does this mean the Age of Fracture is wrong? Not necessarily. Real-world societies are all built upon complicated histories involving violence, oppression, and moral compromise. The question is not whether a system has problematic origins, but whether it can be reformed, whether new leadership can guide it toward better outcomes, whether the structure itself is redeemable despite its flawed foundation. By becoming Elden Lord, you gain the power to potentially guide the Golden Order in new directions. Perhaps you will rule more justly than Marika did. Perhaps you will use your authority to protect the marginalized rather than persecute them, to foster inclusion rather than enforce rigid hierarchies. The ending itself doesn't specify what kind of Elden Lord you will be, leaving space for the possibility that your reign might be different from those that came before. Yet there are also reasons to be skeptical about the possibility of meaningful reform within this structure. Marika herself was once a victim who presumably didn't intend to become an oppressor, yet the logic of maintaining divine authority seemed to inevitably lead her down paths of violence and domination. The system itself, the concentration of cosmic power in the hands of a single ruler, backed by divine mandate, may contain inherent tendencies toward tyranny regardless of the individual occupying the throne. The Age of Fracture represents continuity, the choice to work within existing structures rather than overthrowing them. This is the conservative option in the truest sense, seeking to conserve what already exists, while hoping that better leadership can address its problems. For those who believe in incremental reform, in the value of tradition and established institutions, this ending offers a vision of restoration and healing. But for those who see the problems of the Golden Order as structural rather than simply the result of poor leadership, the Age of Fracture may seem like a missed opportunity. The Shattering offered a chance to fundamentally reimagine how the lands between might be organized, to break the cycles of violence and oppression that have defined every previous cosmic order. By simply repairing what was broken, you may be ensuring that these cycles continue. The narrator's words about this age being remembered fondly, about songs being sung of the tarnished who became Elden Lord, take on an ambiguous quality in this light. Is this genuine celebration of a hero who saved the world, or is it the propaganda of victors who write history to justify their rule? The fact that we're told the story will be remembered well doesn't necessarily mean the reality lives up to the legend. In the context of Elden Ring's broader themes about power and responsibility, the Age of Fracture asks a crucial question. Is it better to work within existing systems, accepting their flaws while trying to mitigate harm and gradually improve outcomes, or to reject those systems entirely in favor of more radical alternatives? This is not an academic question, but one that faces anyone who seeks to make the world better while wielding institutional power. The ending leaves you seated upon the throne, bathed in golden light, with the weight of cosmic responsibility resting on your shoulders. What you do with that responsibility, how you use the power you've claimed, remains unspecified. The Age of Fracture is less an ending than a beginning, the start of your reign as Elden Lord in a restored but still fractured world. Moving beyond the straightforward restoration of the Age of Fracture, we encounter our first alternative ending, the Age of Order, achieved through the completion of Brother Corrin and Goldmask's questline. This ending represents not merely a repair of the Elden Ring but an attempt to perfect it, to create a system of cosmic law so refined and flawless that it eliminates the possibility of the failures that led to the shattering in the first place. Goldmask himself is one of the most enigmatic characters in Elden Ring. A brilliant scholar who has devoted his existence to contemplating the nature of the Golden Order, he communicates only through gestures, standing in silent meditation at various locations throughout the lands between, while his companion Brother Corrin interprets his insights for those who would understand them. This silence is not a limitation but a choice, suggesting someone who has moved beyond conventional communication into a realm of pure philosophical contemplation. The questline that leads to the Age of Order beginning when you first encounter Goldmask on the broken bridge leading to the capital. He poses a riddle about the fundamental nature of the Golden Order, a puzzle that cannot be solved through combat prowess or exploration alone, but requires intellectual engagement with the world's deepest mysteries. The answer lies in discovering the truth that Radagon and Marika are one and the same being, a revelation hidden within a statue in Lendel and unveiled through the law of regression incantation. This discovery is central to Goldmask's philosophy. Here was divine authority that fought against itself, a god divided who created the very conflicts that eventually shattered the Elden Ring. Radagon sought to repair what Marika had broken, battling against his own other self in a contradiction that made stable rule impossible. For Goldmask, this internal divine conflict exemplified the fundamental problem with the Golden Order as it had existed. It gave too much power to beings capable of personal desire, emotion, and error. From this understanding, Goldmask developed his vision of perfect order. If the problem was that gods could act according to personal whim rather than universal principle, then the solution was to create a system where even the gods themselves were bound by immutable cosmic law. No longer would divine caprice be able to override rational order. No longer would divine caprice be able to override rational order. No longer could personal desire trump universal justice. The gods would be subject to the same perfect laws as everyone else, unable to introduce chaos through their individual failings. The mending rune of perfect order, which Goldmask creates through his research and meditation, represents this vision made manifest. When used to repair the Elden Ring, it modifies the fundamental structure of reality to incorporate these principles of absolute law. The resulting Age of Order would be one where cosmic governance operates according to perfect, rational principles, where arbitrary authority has been eliminated in favor of systematic justice. Brother Corrin, who accompanies Goldmask throughout much of this journey, initially embraces this vision with enthusiasm. As a prophet of the Golden Order, he had long sought to understand and perfect its principles. Goldmask's insights seemed to offer exactly what he had been searching for, a way to take what was good about the Golden Order and eliminate what was flawed, creating something genuinely transcendent. Yet as the quest progresses, Corrin finds himself increasingly troubled. The more he understands about Goldmask's vision, the more he realizes how radical it truly is. Perfect order means the elimination not just of divine caprice but of divine freedom, binding the gods in ways that fundamentally limit their ability to act. For someone who has devoted his life to faith in divine authority, this crosses a line from reformation to something that feels almost blasphemous. The philosophical implications of the Age of Order are profound and worth examining in detail. On one hand, this ending offers an appealing solution to the problem of power corrupting those who wield it. If even gods are bound by perfect law, then tyranny becomes impossible. Justice would be administered according to universal principles rather than personal preference. The arbitrariness that characterized previous divine rule, with grace granted or withdrawn seemingly at random, would be replaced by systematic fairness. This vision resonates strongly with Enlightenment ideals about the rule of law and the possibility of rational governance. The belief that society can be organized according to logical principles, that justice can be codified and systematized, and that proper institutional design can solve social problems runs deep in modern political philosophy.
Culture might, culturalism, rumble, runs ideas, Ross, runs in this, the rumblesses, running, winning.
The Age of Order represents the ultimate expression of these ideals, extending them beyond human society to encompass cosmic governance itself. Yet the Age of Order also raises troubling questions about the cost of such perfection. Perfect law, by definition, cannot be changed without becoming imperfect. This means that the Age of Order would create a static universe, one where the fundamental principles governing reality are fixed forever. There would be no possibility of adaptation to changing circumstances, no ability to recognize that what seemed like perfect law at one moment might prove inadequate in a different context. Human societies, and presumably cosmic orders as well, face novel challenges that couldn't have been anticipated when their governing principles were first established. The ability to adapt, to revise laws in light of new understanding, and to correct mistakes has historically been crucial for the long-term survival of civilizations. The Age of Order's perfection comes at the cost of this flexibility, creating a system that might be optimal for the conditions under which it was designed, but increasingly inappropriate as circumstances change. There's also the question of who gets to decide what constitutes perfect law in the first place. Goldmask's vision is based on his own understanding of universal principles, his own philosophical insights into the nature of justice and order. But different philosophers, different cultures, and different historical periods have had dramatically varying ideas about what constitutes justice. What seems universal and rational from one perspective might seem arbitrary and oppressive from another. The Age of Order assumes that reason can discover objective moral truths that transcend culture and context. This is a controversial philosophical position, one that many thinkers have challenged by pointing out how concepts of justice and fairness are shaped by social conditions, historical experiences, and power relationships. By encoding one particular vision of perfect order into the fundamental structure of reality, this ending eliminates the possibility of alternative conceptions of justice ever being realized. From a governance perspective, the Age of Order represents the ultimate technocracy, the belief that expert knowledge and rational systems can solve social problems better than democratic deliberation or traditional authority. This approach has obvious appeal, especially when looking at the failures of previous systems. Why trust infallible rulers or chaotic democratic processes when you could have governance according to perfect principles discovered through philosophical inquiry? Yet the history of technocratic governance in the real world suggests reasons for caution. Systems designed by experts often fail to account for local knowledge, particular circumstances, and the ways that lived experience might diverge from theoretical models. What looks perfect on paper may prove problematic in practice, and the more rigid the system, the less able it is to correct for these discrepancies between theory and reality. The Age of Order also raises questions about the nature of virtue and moral development. If perfect law constrains everyone, including the gods, to act rightly, then right action becomes a matter of following rules rather than exercising judgment. There's no room for moral growth, for learning from mistakes, or for the development of wisdom through experience. Everyone simply follows the law because violation is impossible, not because they understand why it's good or have chosen to align themselves with it. This elimination of moral choice might actually represent a kind of death, the end of ethical life in any meaningful sense. If we can't choose wrongly, then choosing rightly loses its significance. Virtue requires the possibility of vice, and by eliminating that possibility, the Age of Order might eliminate virtue as well, replacing it with mere compliance. In the context of Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations, the Age of Order takes on additional complexity. We now understand that the Golden Order was built upon cycles of violence and revenge, with Marika's crusade against the Hornsent representing just one iteration of a pattern stretching back through generations. Goldmask's perfect order could be seen as an attempt to break these cycles by making revenge impossible through the constraint of perfect law. If even gods cannot act on personal grievance, if all actions must conform to universal principles, then the kind of vendetta that characterized Marika's rule becomes impossible. The Age of Order might finally end the cycles of persecution and counter-persecution that have defined the lands between's history by eliminating the possibility of anyone, no matter how powerful, acting on such impulses. Yet this solution is achieved by constraining everyone, not just potential tyrants. The innocent and the guilty, the just and the unjust, all find themselves equally bound by perfect law. Freedom is sacrificed for security, possibility for certainty, growth for stability. Whether this trade-off is worthwhile depends on one's philosophical perspective about the relative value of these different goods. The cinematics for the Age of Order show the same basic scene as the Age of Fracture, with the Tarnished seated upon the throne, but the narration differs significantly. The words speak of the Age of Order specifically, suggesting a transformation that goes beyond mere restoration. This is not simply healing what was broken, but creating something new, something that has never existed before in the lands between. A cosmic order, where law rather than personal authority reigns supreme. Brother Corin's crisis of faith, during this questline, offers a poignant meditation on the difficulty of truly radical reform. He begins as someone committed to perfecting the Golden Order, but when confronted with what perfection actually requires, he balks. His dedication to the Order was always personal, rooted in faith and relationship with divine authority. Goldmask's impersonal, systematic perfection strips away everything that made Corin's faith meaningful to him. This suggests an important insight about the nature of belief and commitment. Many people who claim to want perfect justice or perfect order are actually attached to existing institutions, relationships, and ways of life that imperfect systems provide. When offered genuine transformation that would eliminate these familiar elements, they often prefer the flawed but known to the perfect but alien. The Age of Order is perhaps the most intellectually satisfying ending for those who believe in the power of reason to solve problems. It represents the triumph of philosophy over politics, of universal principle over particular interests. It promises an end to the arbitrariness and injustice that have characterized previous cosmic orders, replacing them with something genuinely fair and rational. Yet it also represents a kind of death, the end of history and the closing of possibilities. In the Age of Order, nothing new can emerge because newness itself violates the perfection of established law. The universe becomes a clockwork mechanism, perfectly designed but incapable of genuine creativity or growth. Whether this represents the ultimate achievement of civilization or its tragic conclusion depends on what you value most. Stability or possibility, justice or freedom, perfection or life. The Age of the Duskborn represents a fundamentally different approach to healing the lands between's wounds. Where the Age of Fracture seeks to restore the status quo, and the Age of Order seeks to perfect it, the Age of the Duskborn challenges one of the Golden Order's most fundamental principles: the binding of death itself. This ending, achieved through the completion of Fear the Deathbed Companion's questline, envisions a world where the natural cycle of life and death is restored, and where those who exist in the liminal space between the two are accepted rather than persecuted. Fear herself is a figure of profound compassion and transgression. As a deathbed companion, her role in her homeland was to hold the dying and absorb their warmth, their life essence, and pass it on to champions who would carry it into battle. It's an intimate form of service, one that requires comfort with death and acceptance of the natural end of life. When you meet her in the Round Table Hold, she offers to hold you, to provide comfort and warmth. Though this embrace comes with a cost, she drains a small portion of your vitality, manifested in the game as a debuff to your maximum health. This transaction perfectly encapsulates the philosophy behind the Age of the Duskborn. Death is not something to be feared or eliminated, but accepted as part of the natural order. The vitality that fear takes is not stolen, but willingly given in exchange for comfort and blessing. The debuff you receive is temporary and easily removed, suggesting that engaging with death, acknowledging its presence and power, need not be permanently harmful. Fia's ultimate goal becomes clear as her questline progresses. She seeks to give birth to a mending rune through the most intimate possible relationship with death itself, lying with the corpse of Godwyn the Golden in the deep-root depths. Godwyn, the first demigod to die after Marika bound death, exists in a state of undeath. His soul destroyed but his body continuing to spread a corruption, called Deathblight, throughout the roots of the Erdtree. The location where this ritual takes place is significant. The deep-root depths exist far beneath the surface world, in ancient caverns where the roots of the Erdtree have penetrated to draw sustenance from sources that predate the Golden Order. Here, in this primal place where life and death intermingle through the very structure of the world, Fia performs her final service. She lies with Godwyn's grotesque corpse, giving her life to birth the mending rune of the Death Prince. This act is simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, sacred and profane. It represents the ultimate acceptance of death, not as enemy but as partner, not as end but as transformation. Fia doesn't seek to destroy death or control it, but to embrace it fully, to become one with it, in order to bring forth something new. The mending rune that emerges from this union carries the power to restore the natural cycle that the Golden Order disrupted. The age of the Duskborn that this rune creates would be a world where the sharp distinction between life and death becomes more permeable. The Duskborn are those who exist in twilight states, neither fully alive nor fully dead, but occupying the spectrum between these poles. Under the Golden Order, such beings were abominations to be destroyed. In the age of the Duskborn, they would be accepted as natural parts of the world's diversity. This ending can be understood through the lens of acceptance and inclusion. Throughout Elden Ring, you encounter beings who have been marginalized by the Golden Order for their nature. Omens born with horns, misbegotten with their animal features, Albinaurics created rather than born, and those who live in death who exist in undead states. Each of these groups has been persecuted, hunted, or at best merely tolerated by the existing order. The age of the Duskborn extends acceptance to the most fundamentally excluded category, the dead themselves. By restoring death as a natural process rather than a bound and controlled one, this ending suggests that all states of being, all forms of existence, have their place in the cosmic order. The dead should not be forced to return to the Erdtree or prevented from moving on, but allowed to follow natural cycles even if those cycles include states that the living find uncomfortable or frightening. From an ecological perspective, the age of the Duskborn makes profound sense. In natural ecosystems, death is not an enemy, but a crucial part of the cycle that allows life to continue. Dead organisms decompose, returning nutrients to the soil, feeding other forms of life, making space for new growth. The Golden Order's attempt to eliminate death was, from this view, an act of ecological violence that disrupted the fundamental cycles necessary for healthy systems to function. The restoration of these cycles doesn't mean that death becomes any less sorrowful for those who experience loss. Fia's compassion, her willingness to hold the dying and provide comfort, remains central to this ending's vision. The age of the Duskborn doesn't celebrate death or make it less painful, but acknowledges its necessity and natural place in the world's functioning. The philosophical implications extend beyond ecology to questions about what constitutes valuable existence. The Golden Order had a narrow definition: those touched by grace, those who fit within certain categories, those who aligned with its vision of proper being. Everything outside these boundaries was at best marginal, at worst actively suppressed. The age of the Duskborn suggests a more pluralistic view where the full spectrum of existence, from birth through life, death, and whatever lies beyond, all have intrinsic worth. This pluralism resonates with contemporary discussions about inclusion and acceptance of difference, just as societies grapple with expanding definitions of who deserves full rights and recognition. The age of the Duskborn imagines a cosmic order that expands to include forms of existence previously excluded. The undead, those who live in death, would no longer be abominations, but simply another form of being with their own place in the world. Yet this ending also raises questions about what such acceptance means in practice. A world where the boundary between life and death is fluid might be more diverse and inclusive, but it might also be more dangerous and unpredictable for the living. The undead you encounter throughout Elden Ring are not peaceful. They attack on sight, and many seem to have lost most of what made them who they were in life. If such beings are accepted as natural and allowed to exist freely, what does that mean for the safety and comfort of those who remain fully alive? The Age of the Duskborn doesn't promise a comfortable world, only a more complete one. It's an ending that prioritizes authenticity over comfort, natural processes over imposed order, acceptance over control. Whether this represents genuine progress or dangerous naivety depends on your philosophical perspective about the relationship between civilization and nature. In the context of Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations, the Age of the Duskborn takes on additional meaning. Marika's people, the shamans, possessed unique properties that allowed them to be melded with others in the jar rituals practiced by the Hornsent. Their very nature made them liminal beings, existing between individual and collective identity. The persecution they suffered for this nature parallels the persecution of the undead under the Golden Order. The Age of the Duskborn could be seen as a vindication for all those who have been excluded for their liminal nature. By creating a world where existing between traditional categories is accepted rather than punished, this ending breaks the pattern of persecution that has characterized the lands between's history. Marika, who was once a victim of such persecution, established an order that simply created new categories of exclusion. The Age of the Duskborn offers an alternative: inclusion without coercion, acceptance without forced conformity. Fia's character arc embodies this philosophy beautifully. She begins as someone who provides comfort to the dying, acknowledging death's reality while offering warmth against its chill. She continues by championing those who live in death, defending their right to exist against the Golden Order's persecution. She concludes by literally giving her life to birth a new cosmic order, becoming one with death to transform its relationship with life. The cinematics for this ending show the Tarnished seated upon the throne, but with distinct visual differences that suggest the changed nature of reality. The narration speaks of the Age of the Duskborn, of those who live in death being accepted. It's a quieter ending than some others, less dramatically apocalyptic, but no less profound in its implications for how existence itself is structured. The restoration of Godwyn as the Prince of Death, though he never appears in his restored form, provides a symbolic center for this new age. Godwyn, who was beloved in life, and whose death marked the beginning of the Golden Order's unraveling, becomes in his undeath a new kind of divine figure, not a god of life or order, but a god of the natural processes that include death, transformation, and renewal. This ending asks us to consider whether acceptance of mortality, both our own and that of those we love, might be healthier than the Golden Order's attempt to eliminate it. The fear of death drives much human behavior, including the accumulation of power, the establishment of hierarchies, and the persecution of those who remind us of our own mortality. By embracing death as natural rather than treating it as enemy, the Age of the Duskborn might free people from these fear-driven patterns. Yet there's also melancholy in this ending, an acknowledgement that restoration of natural cycles means accepting loss. Under the Golden Order, souls returned to the Erdtree, and there was at least the hope of some form of continuation. In the Age of the Duskborn, death means genuinely letting go, allowing natural processes to unfold even when they're painful. This requires a different kind of courage than fighting against death. The courage to accept what cannot be changed. The Age of the Duskborn represents radical acceptance, the willingness to embrace all of existence, including its most uncomfortable aspects. It's an ending that doesn't promise to solve problems through power or perfection, but through inclusion and the restoration of natural balances. Whether this vision is noble or naive, profound or dangerous, remains a question each player must answer for themselves based on their own values and understanding of what the lands between needs most. Among all of Elden Ring's possible endings, the Blessing of Despair stands as perhaps the most revealed and disturbing. Achieved through the completion of the Dung Eater's questline and the acquisition of the Mending Rune of the Fell Curse, this ending represents not merely a change in cosmic order, but a deliberate choice to curse all future existence, ensuring that every being born into the world will carry the mark of defilement. It is an ending that challenges players' moral boundaries and forces confrontation with questions about justice, equality, and the acceptable costs of addressing systemic inequality. The Dung Eater himself is one of the most vile characters in Elden Ring's cast. His very name speaks to his nature, and his actions throughout the game, defiling corpses and spreading his curse, mark him as a figure of profound malevolence. When you first encounter him, he's imprisoned in the sewers beneath Lindell, in the subterranean shunning grounds where society hides its most unwanted elements. Even imprisoned, he radiates menace and madness, speaking of his curse and his desire to spread it to all living things. Yet despite his reprehensible nature, the Dung Eater articulates a genuine critique of the world's inequalities. Under the Golden Order, some people are born blessed with grace while others are born cursed as omens. Some enter the world destined for glory and recognition, while others are marked from birth as abominations to be shunned or killed. The system creates fundamental inequalities that have nothing to do with individual choices or merits, but are simply accidents of birth. The Dung Eater's solution to this inequality is characteristically extreme. If some must be cursed, then all should be cursed. If the problem is that society treats some people as inherently lesser based on circumstances beyond their control, then his answer is to make everyone equally cursed, eliminating the hierarchy by dragging everyone down to the same level of defilement. It's a form of radical egalitarianism achieved through universal suffering rather than universal flourishing. To complete his questline, you must feed him seedbed curses, grotesque items found on defiled corpses throughout the lands between. Each one represents an act of violence and desecration that the Dung Eater has committed, a soul twisted and corrupted to serve his vision of cursed equality. The process of gathering these curses and delivering them to him is deeply uncomfortable, forcing players to participate in his vile work, even if they don't share his philosophy. The seedbed curses themselves are described in item text as embodying the primordial current of life itself, twisted and defiled. This suggests that the Dung Eater's curse works at the most fundamental level of existence, corrupting not just individuals but the very processes through which life emerges. His curse doesn't simply affect those currently living but will be passed on through generations, ensuring that all future beings born into the world carry his mark. The final confrontation with the Dung Eater takes place in the sewers, in the subterranean shunning grounds where society's unwanted are hidden away. The location is thematically perfect. Here, in the literal filth beneath the Golden Capital, where the Golden Order's rejects are imprisoned and forgotten, the curse that will drag all existence down to this level is completed. The sewers represent what the Golden Order tries to hide, and the Dung Eater's curse ensures that what was hidden will become universal. When you gather enough seedbed curses and bring them to the Dung Eater, he transforms them into the mending rune of the fell curse. This rune carries within it the power to reshape the fundamental structure of reality, to write into cosmic law itself the principle that all existence will be tainted, all births will be cursed. Using this rune to repair the Elden Ring doesn't restore the old order or perfect it, but corrupts it at its very foundation. The Blessing of Despair ending shows the tarnished seated upon the throne, with the narration speaking of this as an age defined by curse. The narrator states, "The revealed curse that defined our age, the blessing of despair." The blessing of despair. This paradoxical language, calling a curse a blessing, captures the twisted logic of the Dung Eater's vision. Universal suffering is presented as a form of blessing because it eliminates the injustice of selective suffering. The philosophical questions raised by this ending are profoundly uncomfortable. Is the Dung Eater entirely wrong in his diagnosis of the problem? The Golden Order's inequality is undeniable. Throughout the game, you witness how it persecutes omens, how it treats some lives as inherently more valuable than others based on arbitrary distinctions. The system is unjust, and this injustice causes immense suffering for those on the wrong side of its hierarchies. The Dung Eater's error lies not in identifying this problem, but in his solution. His vision achieves equality through shared misery rather than shared flourishing, solving the problem of inequality by ensuring everyone is equally wretched. This represents a form of nihilistic egalitarianism, one that values equality so highly that it's willing to sacrifice all other goods to achieve it. This raises broader questions about the relationship between equality and other values. Most ethical systems recognize multiple goods that must be balanced against each other. Equality, but also liberty, happiness, dignity, and flourishing. The blessing of despair pursues equality with such single-minded focus that it sacrifices everything else, creating a world that is perfectly equal in its universal wretchedness. Yet there's a dark logic to this position. If a system creates fundamental inequalities that cannot be reformed, if some people are destined for suffering purely through accidents of birth, perhaps universal suffering is indeed preferable to selective suffering. At least in the cursed world of the blessing of despair, no one can claim superiority based on divine favor. Everyone bears the same mark, suffers the same fate. This logic appears in various forms of revolutionary thinking throughout human history. When existing inequalities seem intractable, when reform appears impossible, the desire to simply destroy the entire system and create equality through shared deprivation can become appealing. The blessing of despair represents this impulse taken to its ultimate extreme. If we can't all be blessed, we'll all be cursed. If we serestedith das. If we sidest. If we desestis. If we perost. If we can't all be blessed, we'll all be cursed fast. If isolable fast. With farmomerosist, we'll all be cursed. The ending explicitly states that the curse will affect all future generations, that every child born into this world will bear the Dung Eater's mark. This raises profound questions about intergenerational justice and the ethics of imposing one generation's choices on all those who come after. The people who will suffer most from this curse are not those currently living, but those yet to be born, who will have no say in the decision that determines their fate. This aspect of the ending parallels real-world concerns about how current choices, particularly regarding environmental degradation or institutional structures, constrain the possibilities available to future generations. The blessing of despair makes this dynamic explicit and extreme. The choice made at the foot of the Erdtree will shape not just the immediate future, but all future existence. In the context of Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations about cycles of revenge and persecution, the blessing of despair takes on additional horrifying resonance. The history of the lands between is one of victims becoming victimizers, of persecution answered with counter-persecution in endless cycles. The Dung Eater's curse represents the ultimate expression of this pattern. Revenge not against any specific group, but against existence itself. Rather than breaking the cycle of violence, the blessing of despair universalizes it. Instead of identifying specific perpetrators and seeking justice against them, it punishes everyone, including those who had no role in creating the injustices that motivated the curse. It's collective punishment on a cosmic scale, treating all of existence as guilty and deserving of suffering. The Dung Eater's character itself embodies this logic of universal revenge. We're never told what specifically motivated his hatred, what particular injustice turned him toward this path of cosmic vengeance. Perhaps he was an omen himself, born cursed and persecuted for circumstances beyond his control. Perhaps he simply witnessed enough suffering under the Golden Order to conclude that the entire system was irredeemable. The game leaves his motivation ambiguous, focusing instead on the horrifying nature of his solution. What makes the blessing of despair particularly challenging is that it forces players to confront how far they're willing to go to address injustice. The Golden Order's inequalities are real. Its persecution of omens and others is genuinely unjust. But does this injustice justify cursing all future existence? Where is the line between fighting against oppression and becoming an oppressor yourself? The ending offers no comfort, no silver lining, no suggestion that universal curse might somehow lead to unexpected benefits. It is presented as genuinely horrifying, as a world state that represents almost unimaginable suffering for all who must live under it. Yet the game includes it as a possible choice, suggesting that even this darkest of outcomes represents a coherent response to the world's problems, however twisted that response might be. The blessing of despair challenges players to think seriously about what they value more: equity or well-being, equality or flourishing. It asks whether a world where everyone suffers equally might somehow be more just than one, where some flourish while others suffer. And it suggests, through its grim presentation, that most people would choose beneficial inequality over cursed equality, revealing perhaps that our commitment to equality has limits when achieving it requires universal degradation. This ending stands as Elden Ring's darkest possibility, the path that offers no hope and no redemption. It represents nihilism given cosmic authority, revenge elevated to divine principle, and the ultimate failure to break cycles of violence and oppression. Whether completing this ending represents genuine engagement with the game's darkest themes, or simply a desire to see all possible outcomes remains a question each player must answer for themselves. If the blessing of despair represents despair and revenge, the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending represents something even more radical, the complete rejection of existence itself through the return to primordial chaos. This ending, unique in how it overrides all other possible choices once you've committed to it, doesn't seek to reform the world or curse it, but to burn it all away, destroying the very conditions that make suffering possible by eliminating differentiation itself. The path to becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame begins deep beneath Lindell, in the lowest depths of the subterranean shunning grounds. Here, beyond even the Dung Eater's prison, past endless corridors and deadly falls, lies the Frenzied Flame prescription. This is a space that feels fundamentally wrong, where the architecture becomes alien and the air itself seems to burn with invisible fire. At the center of this sanctum wait the three fingers, counterpart to the two fingers that serve the greater will. The encounter with the three fingers is unlike anything else in Elden Ring. To approach them, you must strip away all equipment, standing naked and vulnerable before these avatars of chaos. When you do, they embrace you, burning their mark into your flesh, while incomprehensible whispers fill the air. The cutscene that plays is deeply disturbing, showing your character's eyes igniting with the flame of frenzy as something fundamental within you changes. From this moment forward, you are marked. The grace in your eyes is replaced with the yellow flame of chaos. NPCs react to this change with fear or disgust. And most significantly, once you bear the mark of the three fingers, the Lord of Frenzied Flame, ending becomes inevitable. No other conclusion is possible unless you undertake the extremely difficult side quest involving Millicent and Miquella's needle to remove the mark. This inevitability is itself thematically significant. The Frenzied Flame doesn't offer a choice. It consumes choice. Once chaos touches you, it overwrites all other possibilities, much as the flame itself seeks to burn away all distinction and difference. The inability to change your mind after accepting the three fingers' embrace reflects the all-consuming nature of nihilism and despair once they take hold. The philosophy behind the Frenzied Flame is revealed through the words of Hyetta, a blind maiden who serves as the flame's prophet. She speaks of the One Great, a primordial unity that existed before the greater will fractured it into multiplicity. All suffering, according to this philosophy, stems from division and differentiation. The separation of one being from another creates conflict. The division of the cosmos into distinct entities makes inequality and injustice possible. If everything were once again unified, there could be no suffering because there would be no separate beings to suffer. This represents a form of philosophical monism taken to its absolute extreme. Rather than seeing diversity and multiplicity as sources of richness and possibility, the Frenzied Flame views them as mistakes to be corrected. The solution it offers is not to manage conflict or reduce suffering within a diverse world, but to eliminate diversity entirely, returning all things to undifferentiated unity through cosmic fire. The parallels to certain mystical traditions are apparent but inverted. Many spiritual philosophies speak of recognizing the fundamental unity underlying apparent multiplicity, of seeing through the illusion of separation to the oneness that connects all beings. But these traditions typically envision this recognition as bringing peace and compassion, not destruction. The Frenzied Flame offers a twisted version of this insight, achieving unity not through recognition but through annihilation. Hyetta's quest itself mirrors your journey toward becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame. As she travels the lands between, she consumes shabriri grapes, which are revealed to be eyeballs of those who died in madness and frenzy. Her literal blindness parallels the spiritual blindness of those who, unable to see hope in the world as it exists, choose to destroy it entirely. Yet she describes her journey toward the Frenzied Flame as one of increasing clarity, suggesting that from within this philosophy, destruction appears as enlightenment. The quest involving Shabriri himself, who possesses the body of your friend Yura, adds another layer to the Frenzied Flame's narrative. Shabriri was a figure in the lands between's history who was blamed for the worst slanders and received the most severe punishments as a result. He represents false accusation and scapegoating, the way societies create enemies to blame for their problems. His association with the Frenzied Flame suggests a connection between experiencing injustice and embracing nihilistic destruction. If you bear the mark of the 3 fingers when you reach the ending, the game automatically gives you the Lord of Frenzied Flame conclusion regardless of what other preparations you've made. The cutscene that plays is apocalyptic in the truest sense. Rather than sitting upon the throne, you stand amidst flames as the Erdtree burns, the lands between are reduced to ash, and reality itself begins to unravel. Your character has become an avatar of chaos, chosen to burn away all distinction and return everything to primordial unity. If Melina is still alive to witness this, having not sacrificed herself at the Forge of the Giants, she appears one final time to vow that she will hunt you down and deliver destined death to you. Her words carry weight because she recognizes what you've done, not the salvation you might have promised yourself this path represented, but the ultimate betrayal of everything that exists. In her view, you've chosen destruction over any possible form of existence, however flawed. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending forces confrontation with the appeal of nihilism in the face of intractable suffering. When the world seems irredeemably broken, when every attempt at reform seems to perpetuate the same cycles of violence and oppression, when the weight of cosmic responsibility seems unbearable, the desire to simply burn it all down becomes psychologically understandable, if not morally defensible. This ending speaks to a particular form of despair. Not merely personal unhappiness, but cosmic hopelessness. The belief that existence itself is a mistake that can only be corrected through its elimination. It's the philosophical position that suffering is so fundamental to the nature of separated existence that the only solution is to eliminate separation, even if doing so requires destroying everything that exists. In the context of Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations about cycles of violence and persecution, the Lord of Frenzied Flame represents the ultimate rejection of these cycles. Where other endings attempt to break the pattern through reform, revolution, or acceptance, the Frenzied Flame simply burns away the possibility of patterns continuing by eliminating the world in which they occur. If victims inevitably become victimizers, if divine authority always leads to oppression, then perhaps the only solution is to eliminate the conditions that make these dynamics possible. Yet this solution is inherently self-defeating. The Frenzied Flame promises to eliminate suffering by eliminating sufferers, to solve the problems of existence by ending existence. But this means that all the good in the world, all the joy, beauty, love, and meaning that might exist alongside suffering is also destroyed. The price of eliminating the possibility of pain is eliminating the possibility of everything else as well. The ending raises profound questions about whether existence itself is worthwhile. Is a world containing both joy and suffering better than no world at all? Does the presence of injustice and pain make existence a net negative, or do the possibilities for beauty and meaning outweigh these negatives? The Lord of Frenzied Flame represents one possible answer: that existence itself is the problem, and non-existence is preferable. This is perhaps the most philosophically extreme position imaginable, one that values the elimination of suffering so highly that it's willing to sacrifice existence itself to achieve it. It represents a form of cosmic antinatalism, the belief that it would be better if nothing existed because existence inevitably involves suffering for someone. The visual presentation of this ending emphasizes its apocalyptic nature. The golden light of the Erdtree is replaced by yellow flames that consume everything. The carefully constructed world that players have spent dozens of hours exploring burns away to nothing. It's beautiful in a terrible way, gorgeous and horrifying simultaneously, much like the philosophy it represents. The relationship between this ending and player psychology is worth considering. Elden Ring can be a brutally difficult game, and the lands between are filled with hostile forces, tragic stories, and seemingly intractable problems. After experiencing enough defeat and witnessing enough suffering, the desire to just burn it all down might become appealing not as a philosophical position, but as an emotional release. The game acknowledges this by making the Frenzied Flame relatively easy to access compared to some other endings. You don't need to complete elaborate questlines or find obscure items. You simply need to find your way to the Three Fingers and accept their embrace. This accessibility suggests that the developers understood the psychological appeal of destructive nihilism when faced with overwhelming challenges. Yet the game also provides a way to reverse this choice through Miquella's needle, suggesting that even the most extreme forms of nihilism need not be permanent. The possibility of removing the Frenzied Flame's mark represents hope that despair can be overcome, that even those who have embraced destruction can step back from that brink. But the difficulty of obtaining and using the needle ensures that this reversal requires significant effort and commitment. The Lord of Frenzied Flame stands as Elden Ring's most radical ending, the choice that doesn't seek to improve the world but to eliminate it. It represents nihilism given cosmic authority, despair elevated to divine principle, and the ultimate failure not just of reform but of hope itself. Whether players choose this path out of genuine philosophical conviction, curiosity about seeing all possible endings, or emotional exhaustion with the world's problems, it remains the darkest possible conclusion to the Tarnished's journey. Among all of Elden Ring's endings, the Age of Stars stands apart as perhaps the most complex, philosophically rich, and widely celebrated by players. Achieved through the completion of Ranni, the witch's intricate questline, this ending represents not merely a change in earthly rule, but a fundamental transformation of the relationship between cosmic forces and mortal existence. It promises freedom from tyranny through the removal of divine authority to a distance where it cannot directly interfere with mortal self-determination. Ranni herself is among the most compelling characters in the entire Souls genre. A demigod who orchestrated her own death, a daughter who rebelled against her mother's order, a being who exists simultaneously in multiple forms, she embodies the contradictions and complexities that define the lands between itself. When you first encounter her at her tower in Liurnia, she appears as a spectral form with 4 arms and a half-closed eye, speaking in archaic language about her intentions to challenge the very foundations of the cosmic order. Her quest is correspondingly elaborate, taking you across the breadth of the lands between and beyond. You must defeat Starscourge Raiden to unlock the path to Nokron, the Eternal City, where the Fingerslayer blade awaits. This weapon, capable of harming the agents of the Greater Will, represents the possibility of challenging divine authority itself. Retrieving it requires exploring an entire underground civilization, facing formidable enemies, and piecing together the story of a people who once sought their own liberation from cosmic control. The Fingerslayer blade's very existence raises profound questions. How was it created? Who made a weapon specifically designed to harm the Greater Will's agents? The answer lies in the history of the Eternal Cities, civilizations that once sought to create their own Lord of Night, their own alternative to the Greater Will's chosen order. They were punished for this transgression, their cities buried beneath the earth, but their legacy lives on in this blade that makes resistance possible. Ranni's quest continues through the inverted Carian study hall, where reality itself is turned upside down through the power of the Carian inverted statue. This serves as both gameplay mechanic and metaphor. Ranni's entire project involves inverting the established cosmic order, turning upside down the assumptions about how gods and mortals should relate to one another. The very architecture must be transformed to reveal the path forward. The journey culminates in the depths beneath Ainsel River, where Ranni waits in a state between life and death, her soul housed in a doll, while her original body lies cold above. Here you present her with the Dark Moon Ring, a symbol not just of personal alliance but of cosmic transformation. The ring represents betrothal, partnership, a union between the Tarnished and Ranni that will reshape the fundamental structure of reality. The significance of Ranni existing in a doll's body cannot be overstated. She chose this form, abandoning her Empyrean flesh to escape the destiny that Two Fingers had ordained for her. Her willingness to inhabit an artificial body rather than fulfill the role cosmic forces intended demonstrates the depth of her commitment to self-determination. She would rather exist as a doll, limited and constrained, than be forced into godhood against her will. This choice resonates with themes of agency and identity. Ranni refuses to let her nature as an Empyrean, a being chosen by cosmic forces to potentially become a vessel for godhood, determine her destiny. Instead, she asserts control over her own existence, even at great personal cost. Her rebellion is not merely political but ontological. She rejects not just who should rule, but the very idea that cosmic forces should dictate individual destinies. The Age of Stars ending itself is visually and thematically distinct from all others. Rather than sitting upon the Erdtree's throne, the Tarnished ascends with Ranni into the cosmos itself, beginning what she describes as a 1,000-year voyage. The golden Erdtree that has dominated the skyline throughout your journey is replaced by a dark moon, and Ranni speaks of establishing an order of the stars and moon, the chill night that she will keep far from the earth beneath. This final speech has been the subject of much analysis and debate, particularly regarding translation differences between the English and Japanese versions. In both, Ranni's core intention is clear. She seeks to create a cosmic order that exists but does not interfere, that provides structure without imposing tyranny, that rules from such a distance that it cannot be touched or corrupted by mortal politics or divine caprice. The phrase about keeping her order, far from the earth beneath our feet, or from sight, depending on translation, speaks to this philosophy. By removing herself and the cosmic order she establishes to a distance, where they cannot be directly perceived or touched, Ranni prevents would-be tyrants from claiming divine mandate for their earthly rule. No one can say, "The gods command this," when the gods have deliberately made themselves imperceptible. This represents a form of cosmic libertarianism, or perhaps cosmic federalism. Universal principles still exist. The stars and moon still govern reality in some fundamental sense, but these cosmic forces no longer translate into direct earthly authority. Mortals are free to develop their own systems of governance, their own social structures, their own understandings of justice, without divine interference or cosmic compulsion. The 1,000-year voyage that Ranni and the Tarnished undertake together suggests both literal and metaphorical meaning. Literally, they will spend the next millennium exploring the cosmos, learning its secrets, understanding the wisdom of stars and moon. Metaphorically, this represents a complete break from the cycles of earthly politics and divine intervention that have defined the lands between's history. Instead of ruling, they remove themselves from the position to rule, creating space for something new to emerge. This ending is often considered the good ending by many players, and it's easy to understand why. It promises freedom from tyranny, liberation from oppressive cosmic forces, and the possibility of mortals determining their own fate. Unlike the Age of Fracture, which maintains existing power structures, or the Blessing of Despair, which curses everyone, or the Lord of Frenzied Flame, which destroys everything, the Age of Stars offers hope for genuine transformation without catastrophic cost. Yet this ending also raises questions and involves trade-offs that shouldn't be ignored. By removing herself and cosmic authority to such a distance, Ranni also removes cosmic protection and guidance. The lands between will be left to face its challenges without divine intervention. If threats emerge that mortals cannot handle alone, if disasters occur that would require cosmic power to address, the gods will not be there to help because they have deliberately made themselves unreachable. There's also the question of what order means in this context. Ranni speaks of establishing an order of the stars and moon, but what does this order entail? If it's truly imperceptible and untouchable, how does it function as order at all? Perhaps the answer lies in understanding cosmic order as something more like natural law, the fundamental principles that govern physical reality rather than moral commandments or political structures. The relationship between Ranni and the Tarnished in this ending deserves special attention. Unlike every other ending where the Tarnished rules alone or serves as an instrument of larger forces, only in the Age of Stars do they become a true partner, ruling alongside someone who shares power with them. This partnership model represents a fundamentally different approach to cosmic governance, one based on collaboration rather than hierarchy. Ranni's character arc leading to this ending demonstrates her capacity for genuine care despite her cool demeanor. She provides you with the spirit calling bell early in the game, a gift that proves invaluable throughout your journey. She assembles a team of loyal followers, not through compulsion or divine authority, but through genuine relationships. When you complete her quest, she expresses something that might be love, or at least deep appreciation, for your partnership. This stands in stark contrast to the other cosmic forces in the game. The greater will works through intermediaries and compulsion. Marika's relationships with her consorts seem more strategic than affectionate. The Frenzied Flame consumes rather than partners. Ranni offers something different, the possibility of cosmic rule based on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than dominance and submission. In the context of Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations about cycles of violence and divine oppression, the Age of Stars represents perhaps the most complete break from these patterns. By removing divine authority from direct earthly rule, it eliminates the possibility of gods using their power to persecute mortals. No more crusades like Marika's campaign against the Hornson. No more hierarchies based on divine favor. No more persecution of those who exist outside cosmic order's narrow definitions. The Age of Stars suggests that the problem isn't who holds divine power, but the very existence of divine power in positions where it can directly control mortal life. Ranni's solution is not to claim such power for herself and promise to use it justly, but to remove the power itself from the positions where it has historically been abused. It's a structural solution to structural problems, one that changes the system rather than simply changing who operates within it. The visual aesthetic of this ending, with the dark moon replacing the golden Erdtree, carries its own symbolism. The moon is a gentler light than the sun, illuminating without blinding, guiding without dominating. It's cyclical, waxing, and waning, rather than constant, and it's associated with night, with mystery, with things hidden and secret, rather than things exposed and controlled. All of this suggests a different kind of cosmic order, one that works through subtle influence rather than overt command. The Age of Stars also represents a form of maturation for both the Tarnished and the world. Instead of remaining in the position of subjects seeking divine guidance or rulers imposing divine will, this ending moves beyond that relationship entirely. The world is trusted to develop its own path, and the Tarnished becomes a partner in cosmic exploration rather than an earthly ruler. It's a recognition that perhaps the world has outgrown the need for direct divine governance. Yet there's genuine sacrifice in this ending too. The Tarnished, who has worked so hard to explore and understand the lands between, who has formed relationships with its inhabitants and struggled to save it, must ultimately leave it all behind. The connections forged, the places discovered, the people helped, all of this becomes part of the past as you ascend with Ranni for a cosmic journey. It's a bittersweet conclusion that offers hope for the future at the cost of separation from everything that came before. The philosophy behind the Age of Stars resonates with various political and philosophical traditions. The idea that government governs best when it governs least, that authority becomes tyrannical when too proximate to those it governs, that freedom requires distance from power, these are themes that appear throughout classical liberal and anarchist thought. Ranni's ending applies these principles at a cosmic level. The Age of Stars asks us to consider whether true freedom might require the withdrawal of cosmic authority rather than its reform or perfection. It suggests that no matter how well-intentioned, divine power will inevitably become oppressive if it remains close enough to directly control mortal existence. The solution is not better gods but distant gods, not reformed authority but removed authority. This ending stands as Elden Ring's most hopeful vision, while still maintaining philosophical sophistication. It doesn't promise that removing divine authority will solve all problems or that mortals left to their own devices will create perfect societies. It simply suggests that whatever challenges lie ahead, they should be faced by those who will live with the consequences, without cosmic forces imposing their will from above. Whether this represents genuine wisdom or dangerous abandonment remains a question, but it's a question worth asking. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC adds crucial context by revealing the historical cycles and traumatic foundations upon which the current cosmic order was built. Through the story of Miquella the Kind and the Sealed Land of Shadow, players discover that divine rule has consistently involved violence, that victims often become victimizers, and that even the purest intentions can become tyrannical when backed by sufficient power. Miquella stands as perhaps the most tragic figure in all of Elden Ring's pantheon. Born cursed with eternal youth and possessing the ability to compel love and affection from others, he sought to create a gentler world free from the suffering that defined his family's existence. His creation of unalloyed gold was driven by desire to cure his sister Malenia's scarlet rot. The Erdtree he grew was meant to be a sanctuary for the outcasts and marginalized of the Golden Order. Every action appeared motivated by genuine compassion. Yet the DLC reveals the dark path that Miquella's quest for godhood required. To achieve the divine power he believed necessary to create his gentle world, Miquella divested himself of fundamental aspects of his being as he journeyed through the land of shadow. He abandoned his flesh, Saint Trina, who appears to represent his capacity for love, and other aspects of himself. The ending suggests that by stripping away his humanity to achieve godhood, he lost the very compassion that motivated his quest. This process of self-divesting serves as a powerful metaphor for how the pursuit of power can corrupt even the purest motivations. Miquella appears to have believed he needed godhood to heal the world's wounds, but the path to achieving that godhood required abandoning aspects of himself that gave meaning to his quest. The means potentially undermined the ends, raising questions about whether divine power obtained through such sacrifice can truly create the gentle world originally envisioned. The Land of Shadow itself provides crucial context for understanding the cycles of violence that have defined the lands between's history. This realm, sealed away by Marika behind a veil, contains the evidence of the Golden Order's brutal origins. Here lie the ruins of the Hornsent civilization, a people who preceded Marika's rise to power. The DLC reveals that the Hornsent practiced rituals involving the melding of different forms of life through what they called jar rituals. The Hornsent's jar rituals specifically targeted Marika's people, the shamans, because of their unique properties that allowed them to be melded with others. These rituals involved acts that the game's item descriptions characterize as torture. The tragedy of this persecution, the suffering it caused, and the trauma it inflicted upon Marika cannot be understated. She experienced victimization long before she became a goddess. When Marika achieved godhood, according to the DLC's lore and environmental storytelling, she launched a crusade against the Hornsent in the Land of Shadow. Messmer the Impaler, her son who was born with an abyssal serpent inside him, was left in the Land of Shadow to carry out this work. The DLC shows us a being who is simultaneously perpetrator and victim, responsible for immense violence yet acting out of loyalty and divine command. Messmer's story itself is heartbreaking. Cursed with a serpent within him, branded as a figure of fear and hatred, he nonetheless carried out his mother's will with terrible efficiency. The DLC shows us a being who is simultaneously perpetrator and victim, responsible for immense violence yet acting out of loyalty and divine command. He represents what happens to those who execute the will of cosmic authority, bearing the burden of violence so that others can maintain clean hands. The revelation of this history transforms how we understand every ending in the base game. The Age of Fracture doesn't simply restore order, but specifically restores a system built upon Marika's revenge. The Age of Order seeks to perfect a structure whose foundations are soaked in blood. Even the more revolutionary endings, like the Age of Stars or Age of the Duskborn, must contend with this legacy, this history of violence that preceded and enabled the current cosmic order. Miquella's relationship with Radahn, revealed in the DLC, adds another layer of tragedy, based on information from the remembrance of a god and a lord, and dialogue throughout the DLC. Radahn and Miquella made a vow when they were young. When Malenia fought Radahn in Caelid, she whispered, "Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort," before unleashing the Scarlet Rot. The DLC reveals this battle may have been orchestrated by Miquella to fulfill the ancient vow, with Radahn's death sending his soul to the Land of Shadow, where Miquella could use Mohg's body as a vessel to resurrect him as his consort. The final boss battle against promised consort Radahn, and then Miquella himself, becomes not a fight against obvious evil, but against a vision of compassion that has lost its way. Miquella's ability to compel affection suggests that his gentle world would be one where beings were charmed into gentleness, rather than choosing it freely, where kindness was imposed rather than genuine. As Sir Ansbach notes in the DLC, Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying. This represents perhaps the most insidious form of tyranny, oppression that wears the face of love, control that presents itself as care, domination that claims to be salvation. Miquella's curse, his ability to compel affection, seemed like a gift that could bring people together. But elevated to divine power and divorced from human limitations, it becomes the ultimate violation, the override of the very capacity for genuine choice and feeling. The DLC's ending doesn't provide multiple choices like the base game, but instead offers a memory, a glimpse of Miquella before his transformation. We see him sitting alone beside an empty throne, asking for a gentler world. This image is heartbreaking in its innocence and tragic in its implications. And tread silavu hiured weithu. Bethferdant.
This knows why the ZT were verbal verbal. And your new Europe nodes lot said that.
This was the moment before he chose the path that would lead to his own corruption, before the gentle vision became tyrannical reality. The parallel between Miquella's story and the various endings becomes clear. Each ending represents a different response to the world's suffering, a different attempt to break the cycles of violence and create something better. Yet the DLC warns us that accumulating sufficient power to impose solutions, even well-intentioned solutions, tends to corrupt both the wielder and the solution itself. The Age of Fracture might seem like simple restoration, but now we understand it's restoring a system built upon Marika's revenge, ensuring the patterns continue. The Age of Order's perfect law might eliminate divine caprice, but it does so by extending control to absolute levels, potentially creating new forms of oppression in the name of eliminating old ones. The blessing of despair's universal curse makes explicit what the DLC reveals was always implicit, that cycles of revenge, if left unchecked, ultimately consume everything. Even the Age of Stars, often considered the best ending, must be re-evaluated in light of the DLC. Ranni's solution is to remove divine authority to a distance where it cannot interfere. But is this abandonment or wisdom? Does the world need some form of cosmic guidance? Or has such guidance always been a form of control? The DLC doesn't answer these questions but makes them more urgent and complex. The character of Sir Ansbach, a follower of Moog who pursues Miquella into the Land of Shadow, provides important commentary on these themes. He recognizes that Miquella's charm is a form of manipulation, that love compelled is not true love, and that even the most benevolent vision becomes tyranny when imposed through override of will. His resistance to Miquella represents the value of clear-eyed assessment over enchanted devotion. The DLC's exploration of the Hornsent civilization also raises questions about justice and revenge. The Hornsent's torture of the shamans was genuinely horrific and unjust. Did this justify Marika's crusade of extermination against them? Where is the line between legitimate justice and simple revenge? Can violence ever truly break cycles of violence, or does it only perpetuate them in new forms? These questions resonate through all the endings. The Dung Eater's universal curse can be understood as taking Marika's logic to its extreme. If the world has harmed you, harm the entire world in return. The Frenzied Flame's destruction represents the ultimate conclusion of these cycles. If violence only begets more violence, perhaps the only way to end it is to burn away the possibility of violence along with everything else. The Erdtree, Miquella's attempt to create sanctuary, stands throughout the base game and DLC as a symbol of failed good intentions. It was meant to be a place of healing and acceptance, yet it became a site of horror as Millennia's rot corrupted it, as Moog invaded to steal Miquella away, and as its defenders became afflicted with the same suffering they sought to escape. Good intentions without wisdom, power without restraint, compassion without understanding, all of these can create suffering even while seeking to eliminate it. The Land of Shadow's role as a place of hidden history provides a powerful metaphor for how societies deal with their traumatic pasts. Marika sealed away this realm, not to acknowledge and address the violence that founded her order, but to hide it, to allow the Golden Order to present itself as legitimate and just while its origins remained obscured. Every society contains such hidden histories. Violence that enabled prosperity, oppression that created stability, suffering that was necessary for the system to function, but that the system would prefer not to acknowledge. The DLC suggests that none of the base game's endings truly address this historical legacy, because none of them fully acknowledge it. To create something genuinely better, perhaps the first step is not choosing a new form of cosmic order, but honestly reckoning with the violence that preceded and enabled all previous orders. Yet the game doesn't tell us how to do this or whether it's even possible. It simply shows us the weight of history and asks us to carry that knowledge forward into whatever future we choose. Shadow of the Erdtree ultimately enriches every ending by revealing what they're all built upon and what they're all trying to transcend. The cycles of persecution and revenge, victim becoming victimizer, violence begetting violence, these patterns have defined the world since long before the shattering. Each ending offers a different hope for breaking these cycles, and the DLC shows us why such breaking is both necessary and desperately difficult. The gentle world Miquella sought remains an impossible dream, but perhaps that doesn't mean we should stop seeking gentleness, only that we should be wary of believing we've finally achieved it. Having explored each ending in detail, we now step back to consider the broader philosophical implications that emerge from Elden Ring's multiple conclusions. The game presents us with fundamental questions about the nature of power, the meaning of choice, the burden of cosmic responsibility, and what it means to try to create a better world. These questions have no easy answers, and the game's refusal to provide clear moral guidance reflects the genuine difficulty of the dilemmas it poses. At the heart of Elden Ring's narrative lies a profound meditation on power and its corrupting influence. Every figure who has wielded cosmic authority in the game's history has, to some degree, become tyrannical. Marika, who was once a victim, became a perpetrator. Miquella, who sought gentleness, became an oppressor. Even the greater will itself, which presumably has some kind of cosmic purpose, operates through systems that create immense suffering for those who don't fit its definitions of worthy existence. This pattern suggests that the problem might not be who holds power, but power itself, particularly power concentrated to the degree necessary to reshape reality. The endings force us to confront this uncomfortable possibility. If everyone who gains cosmic authority becomes corrupted by it, then perhaps no individual or system can be trusted with such power. Yet the alternative, allowing chaos and suffering to continue unchecked, seems equally unacceptable. The Age of Fracture represents one response to this dilemma. Accept that power is necessary for order, choose the best person available to wield it, and hope that their rule will be better than what came before. This is essentially a conservative position that acknowledges the flaws in existing systems while maintaining that reform is preferable to revolution. It trusts in institutions and structures while hoping that better leadership can address their shortcomings. The Age of Order takes a different approach. Eliminate the human element from power by making even God subject to perfect law. If personal corruption is the problem, then removing personal judgment from governance might be the solution. This technocratic vision assumes that rational systems can be designed that are superior to human or divine judgment, that the problems of power can be solved through better institutional design. The Age of the Duskborn and the Age of Stars represent two forms of liberation. The first through inclusion and the acceptance of natural processes, the second through the removal of cosmic authority to a distance where it cannot impose tyranny. Both suggest that the problems of power might be addressed not through perfecting its exercise, but through limiting its scope or changing its relationship to those it affects. The Blessing of Despair and the Lord of Frenzied Flame represent the darkest possibilities. That power has so corrupted existence that either universal curse or total annihilation is preferable to any attempt at reform. These endings express nihilistic despair about the possibility of meaningful improvement, suggesting that the cycles of violence and oppression are so deeply embedded in reality's structure that only extreme measures can address them. The question of choice itself becomes complex when examined through the lens of these endings. To what degree do you, the tarnished, truly choose your ending? Grace guides you toward becoming Elden Lord, suggesting that cosmic forces have chosen your path. Various NPCs attempt to influence your decision. The very structure of the questlines shapes what endings become available. Can we meaningfully speak of choice when so many factors beyond our control shape the options available? This mirrors real-world questions about free will and determinism. We make choices, but those choices are constrained by circumstances we didn't choose. Our birth, our society, our histories, the systems in which we operate. The tarnished situation, guided by grace toward a specific goal, but capable of deviating toward alternative endings, reflects the complex relationship between freedom and constraint that characterizes human existence. The endings also raise questions about moral responsibility. If you choose the blessing of despair, are you responsible for the suffering of all future generations? If you choose the Lord of Frenzied Flame, does the world's brokenness justify its destruction? If you choose the Age of Fracture, does that make you complicit in the Golden Order's historical violence? These questions have no comfortable answers because they involve genuine moral dilemmas where reasonable people might disagree. The concept of cosmic responsibility itself deserves examination. What does it mean to be responsible for the fundamental structure of reality? The weight of such responsibility is almost incomprehensible. Every choice you make at the foot of the Erdtree will shape the lives of countless beings across countless generations. How can any individual, no matter how powerful or wise, make such decisions justly? Perhaps this is part of what makes the Age of Stars appealing. It represents the refusal of cosmic responsibility, or at least its transformation into something less directly burdensome. By removing themselves from direct rule and establishing an order that cannot be touched, Ranni and the Tarnished avoid the impossibility of wielding cosmic power wisely. They choose absence over the risk of tyranny, distance over the danger of corruption. The game's multiple endings suggest that there is no perfect solution to the dilemmas it presents. Each ending solves certain problems while creating or perpetuating others. This reflects a mature understanding of political and moral philosophy. Real-world choices rarely offer clearly superior options, but instead force us to prioritize among competing goods and accept trade-offs between different values. The Age of Fracture offers stability at the cost of perpetuating inequality. The Age of Order promises justice through perfect law, but risks eliminating freedom and growth. The Age of the Duskborn embraces natural cycles and inclusion, but might sacrifice protection and comfort. The Blessing of Despair achieves equality through universal suffering. The Lord of Frenzied Flame eliminates all problems by eliminating existence. The Age of Stars offers freedom, but removes guidance. This complexity means that the choice of ending becomes a statement about what you value most. Do you prioritize order or freedom, tradition or innovation, cosmic guidance or mortal self-determination? Different philosophical and political traditions would answer these questions differently, and Elden Ring respects players enough to let them make their own determination rather than imposing a single correct answer. The relationship between power and identity becomes particularly important in this context. To wield the power necessary to shape cosmic order, you must become something other than what you were. The Tarnished, who began as an exile, returns as Elden Lord or Cosmic Consort or Apocalyptic Destroyer. This transformation raises questions about continuity of identity and the moral status of choices made by a transformed self. If becoming powerful enough to solve problems requires changing so fundamentally that you're no longer the person who identified those problems as needing solutions, can you be trusted to solve them well? Miquella's tragedy illustrates this concern. He had to abandon his love to achieve godhood, but his love was precisely what made his vision worth pursuing. The power to create a gentle world made him incapable of genuine gentleness. The endings also force consideration of intergenerational ethics. Your choice will affect not just the current inhabitants of the lands between, but all future beings born into the world you shape. Do you have the right to make such choices for others? What obligations do current generations owe to future ones? These questions become especially acute in endings like the Blessing of Despair that explicitly curse future generations. Real-world parallels abound. Current choices about institutional structures, environmental policies, technological development, and social organization all constrain possibilities for future generations. Every society makes choices that its descendants must live with, often without having any say in those decisions. Elden Ring makes this dynamic explicit and extreme, forcing players to confront the ethical weight of decisions that extend beyond immediate consequences. The absence of objective moral guidance from the game itself reflects philosophical humility about complex questions. Different cultures, traditions, and individuals have varying conceptions of justice, freedom, order, and the good life. What seems obviously right from one perspective might seem clearly wrong from another. By refusing to declare any ending objectively correct, Elden Ring acknowledges this moral pluralism while still requiring that players make a choice. This creates a productive tension. You must choose. You cannot avoid responsibility through inaction, yet you cannot be certain your choice is right. This mirrors the human condition. We must act in the world, making decisions with incomplete information and uncertain consequences, accepting responsibility for outcomes we cannot fully control or predict. The endings transform this existential situation into concrete gameplay, making abstract philosophical problems visceral and immediate. The question of violence and its relationship to social change appears throughout all the endings. Each path to power requires defeating numerous enemies, killing demigods, and overcoming fierce resistance. Can good outcomes be achieved through violent means, or does the violence necessary to seize power corrupt whatever you intended to do with it? The game doesn't answer this directly, but shows through its narrative that violence has characterized every previous cosmic order. Perhaps the most profound implication of Elden Ring's multiple endings is that certainty about such complex matters should itself be questioned. Anyone who claims to know with absolute confidence what cosmic order would be best is probably overestimating their understanding and underestimating the complexity of the problems. The game rewards thoughtful engagement with difficult questions over confident adherence to simple answers. The endings invite philosophical reflection but don't demand it. Some players might choose based on aesthetic preference, or which NPC questline they enjoyed most, or simple curiosity about seeing all possibilities. This flexibility reflects different modes of engagement with fiction and philosophy. Not everyone needs to treat these choices as serious moral exercises, though the game provides depth for those who wish to engage at that level. Ultimately, Elden Ring's philosophical sophistication lies not in providing answers, but in asking questions worth asking. What makes power legitimate? Can authority ever be exercised without becoming tyranny? Do ends justify means? What obligations do we owe to future generations? How should we balance competing values like freedom and security, equality and excellence, tradition and progress? These questions have occupied philosophers for millennia, and the game situates players within these debates, making them participants in ongoing conversations about the fundamental nature of justice and governance. Having examined the endings and their philosophical implications, we now turn our attention to the figure at the center of all these choices, the Tarnished themselves. Who are you really? What does your journey represent? And how does the transformation from exile to cosmic authority affect your identity and the meaning of your choices? These questions about the player character become inseparable from the endings themselves, as what you become shapes what choices are available and meaningful. The Tarnished begin as beings who once knew grace but lost it. This status as exiles, cast out from the lands between and stripped of the golden light that marks the blessed, defines your starting condition. Yet the specifics remain mysterious. We don't know precisely what the Tarnished did or failed to do that resulted in their exile. This ambiguity allows players to imagine their own backstories while maintaining the narrative structure that makes the journey meaningful. The fact that grace returns to the Tarnished, guiding them back to the lands between with the promise of becoming Elden Lord, suggests purpose and intention from cosmic forces. You are not randomly wandering into this story, but have been specifically called back for a reason. This raises questions about fate and destiny. Are you fulfilling a predetermined role, or do you have genuine agency in shaping your path? The game's answer seems to be both. Grace guides you toward the Erdtree, but you can deviate from that guidance. You can pursue alternative questlines that lead to different endings. You can even embrace the Frenzied Flame, turning against the very forces that called you back. This suggests a complex relationship between destiny and choice, where some things are determined while others remain open.
Your identity as tarnished also means you're positioned outside the established hierarchies of the lands between. You're not a demigod with inherited power, not a native with allegiance to existing factions, but an outsider with a unique perspective. This outsider status gives you the freedom to question systems that insiders might take for granted, to see alternatives that those born into the existing order might not imagine. Yet becoming Elden Lord requires you to take a position within that hierarchy, to become the ultimate insider. This transformation from outsider to insider, from exile to ruler, represents a fundamental change in identity and perspective. The question becomes whether you can maintain the critical distance of the outsider, even while occupying the insider's position of authority. Different endings represent different answers to this question. The Age of Fracture suggests you become a traditional insider, sitting upon the throne and ruling as previous Elden Lords did. The Age of Stars suggests you remain somehow apart even while wielding cosmic power, removing yourself to a distance that preserves perspective. The Blessing of Despair and Lord of Frenzied Flame represent the outsider's revenge, using power not to join the system but to destroy or curse it. Your journey through the lands between transforms you in ways beyond just accumulating power. You witness suffering, encounter diverse perspectives, learn hidden histories, and make choices that shape who you become. The Tarnished who reaches the foot of the Erdtree is not the same person who first entered Limgrave, even though mechanical character stats might be the only measurable difference. This transformation raises philosophical questions about identity and continuity. If you change fundamentally through your experiences, are you still the same person who began the journey? Does the changed you have the right to make decisions on behalf of your earlier self's goals and values? When power transforms you, can you trust that your choices still serve the purposes that motivated your quest for power? The various spirit ashes you can collect represent an interesting commentary on identity and purpose. These are remnants of beings who existed before, their essential nature preserved after death, still able to fulfill their remembered purposes. They suggest that identity might have some core that persists beyond death and change, something essential that defines who you are regardless of circumstances. Yet the spirit ashes are also limited, locked into patterns from their living existence, unable to grow or adapt. They fulfill their purposes but cannot question those purposes or choose new ones. This raises the question of whether preserved identity without the capacity for change is genuinely valuable or simply a form of death. Perhaps genuine identity requires the possibility of transformation, even at the risk of becoming someone different. Your choices throughout the game, from which NPCs to help to which bosses to fight to which ending to pursue, gradually define who the Tarnished is. Identity emerges through action rather than being predetermined. This reflects existentialist philosophy about how human beings create themselves through their choices, rather than having fixed natures that exist independent of what they do. The requirement that you defeat numerous enemies, including many who might be sympathetic or who have legitimate grievances against the Golden Order, implicates you in violence regardless of your intentions. You cannot reach any ending without killing many beings, some of whom might have preferred different outcomes than you ultimately choose. This violence becomes part of your identity whether you acknowledge it or not. Different players might imagine their Tarnished as reluctant heroes forced into violence by necessity, as ambitious opportunists seeking power for its own sake, as agents of justice punishing the guilty, or as thoughtless murderers clearing obstacles without moral consideration. The game accommodates all these interpretations, allowing players to construct their own understanding of the character they're playing. The relationship between the player and the Tarnished character creates interesting layers of identity. You make the Tarnished's choices, but the Tarnished exists as a separate entity within the game world. This division between player and character reflects how we all experience ourselves as both agents who make choices and characters in stories we don't fully control, both authors of our lives and subjects of circumstances beyond our control. The various builds and playstyles possible in Elden Ring further complicate identity. A Tarnished who relies primarily on sorcery develops a different relationship with the world than one who uses strength-based melee weapons or faith-based incantations. The magic you use, the armor you wear, The weapons you wield all make statements about identity, even as they're primarily mechanical choices about gameplay effectiveness. This suggests that identity is performative, created through repeated actions and choices that gradually build into patterns defining who you are. The sorcerer tarnished becomes a sorcerer not through inherent nature, but through choosing repeatedly to use sorcery, investing in intelligence, studying glintstone magic, and building their character around this approach. Identity emerges through practice. The moment of choosing an ending becomes the culmination of this identity formation process. Your choice reveals what you've decided is most important, what values you've come to prioritize through your journey. Yet the choice also shapes your future identity, determining what kind of being you'll become going forward. It's simultaneously a revelation of who you are and a creation of who you'll be. The various NPC questlines offer different models of identity and purpose. Bled struggles with divided loyalty between Ranni and his nature as her shadow. Alexander seeks glory through combat and friendship. Millicent searches for her identity independent of Melania's influence. Each represents different ways of understanding who you are and what that means for your choices and responsibilities. Melina's relationship with the Tarnished provides particular insight into questions of identity and purpose. She knows her purpose, to serve as kindling for the Forge, but questions whether this purpose truly defines who she is. Her willingness to sacrifice herself suggests strong commitment to a predetermined role, yet her vow to hunt you, if you choose the Frenzied Flame, suggests agency and values that transcend simple duty fulfillment. The Tarnished's ability to rebirth through Renala's magic, reallocating stats, and changing fundamental capabilities, literalizes the possibility of transformation. You can become someone quite different mechanically, while maintaining narrative continuity. This game mechanic resonates with philosophical questions about whether you can truly change who you are, or whether some core remains constant despite surface transformations. The endings each suggest different final identities for the Tarnished. Elden Lord, Cosmic Consort, Lord of Frenzied Flame, these are not merely titles, but fundamental redefinitions of what you are. Accepting any of these roles means becoming something other than the exile who first entered the lands between. The question is whether this transformation represents fulfillment of your potential or loss of your original self. Some endings emphasize continuity. You remain the Tarnished who becomes Elden Lord, maintaining your identity while gaining authority. Others emphasize radical transformation. You become something so different that your original identity seems almost irrelevant. The Age of Stars' 1,000-year voyage suggests continued transformation, identity as ongoing process rather than fixed state. The Lord of Frenzied Flame suggests identity consumed by chaos, individual selfhood burned away in cosmic fire. The weight of cosmic responsibility that comes with these transformations raises questions about whether any individual identity is sufficient for such roles. Can a single being, however transformed, truly bear the responsibility of shaping reality for all other beings? Perhaps this is why the Age of Stars pairs the Tarnished with Ranni, suggesting that cosmic responsibility should be shared rather than concentrated in a single individual. Your journey also reveals layers of history and previous attempts at achieving what you're attempting. Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, and you ultimately face him as a final test. Radagon sought to repair what Marika shattered, and you fight him at the heart of the Erdtree. These predecessors suggest that you're not unique but part of a pattern, another iteration in an ongoing cycle of rise and fall, ambition and corruption. This historical context raises uncomfortable questions about whether you can truly do better than those who came before. What makes you different from Godfrey or Radagon? Do you possess wisdom they lacked, or will you simply repeat their mistakes in new forms? The game doesn't provide reassurance on this point, leaving you to wonder whether any individual can transcend the patterns that seem to govern cosmic authority. The identity of the Tarnished ultimately remains somewhat indeterminate, shaped by player choice and interpretation more than fixed narrative. This openness allows for diverse readings and personal investment, but also means that questions about who you are and what your journey means remain genuinely open. Perhaps this is appropriate for a game about cosmic uncertainty and the difficulty of knowing what choices are right. As our journey through Elden Ring's endings draws to a close, we find ourselves confronting the same fundamental question that faces the Tarnished at the foot of the Erdtree. What does it all mean? After exploring every ending in detail, after considering their philosophical implications, after wrestling with questions of power, identity, and cosmic responsibility, what understanding emerges? What wisdom, if any, can be drawn from this meditation on choice and consequence? Perhaps the first and most important insight is that there are no perfect solutions to the problems the lands between faces. Every ending offers genuine benefits and creates genuine problems. Every choice involves trade-offs between competing values. This is not a failure of the game's design, but a reflection of genuine moral and political complexity. Real-world societies face similar dilemmas, situations where all available options have significant costs, and where choosing well requires wisdom rather than simply following clear rules. The temptation when faced with such complexity is to retreat into certainty, to convince ourselves that one option is clearly superior and all others are wrong. Yet Elden Ring resists this temptation by presenting each ending with sufficient nuance that reasonable people might genuinely disagree about which is best. This disagreement is not a bug but a feature, an invitation to engage thoughtfully with difficult questions, rather than accepting simple answers. The multiple endings also suggest that perspective matters profoundly. What seems like the best choice from one viewpoint might seem clearly wrong from another. The Age of Fracture's restoration appeals to those who value stability and tradition, but horrifies those who see the Golden Order's systemic injustices as fundamental flaws rather than fixable problems. The Age of Stars' freedom resonates with those who prize autonomy, but troubles those who believe cosmic guidance is necessary. Each ending looks different depending on where you stand and what you've experienced. This multiplicity of perspectives reflects how real moral and political disagreements often stem from people occupying different social positions, having different experiences, and therefore developing different understandings of what problems are most urgent and what solutions are most viable. The game doesn't tell us which perspective is correct, because perhaps no single perspective captures the full truth. Understanding requires engaging with multiple viewpoints, acknowledging their validity even while ultimately committing to a choice. The question of whether change is possible runs through all the endings. Can the lands between truly break the cycles of violence and oppression that have defined its history, or will any new order simply replicate the problems of the old in new forms? The base game presents this as an open question, but Shadow of the Erdtree's revelations about historical cycles add weight to the pessimistic view that patterns tend to repeat regardless of intentions. Yet even if perfect transcendence of these cycles is impossible, that doesn't mean all choices are equivalent. Some options are clearly worse than others, even if none are perfect. The Blessing of Despair's universal curse and the Lord of Frenzied Flame's total destruction offer less hope than the other endings, even if those other endings can't guarantee permanent solutions to the world's problems. Imperfect improvement remains valuable even when perfection is unattainable. The role of violence in achieving change deserves final consideration. Every ending requires defeating numerous enemies, killing demigods, and overcoming fierce resistance. This suggests that significant change always involves conflict and struggle, that power never yields willingly to reform. Yet the game also shows through Marika's crusade and Miquella's compelled love that violence and coercion, even in service of apparently good goals, tend to corrupt those goals and perpetuate cycles of revenge and oppression. This creates a tragic bind. Meaningful change seems to require power, but acquiring and wielding that power tends to corrupt those who do so. Perhaps the best that can be hoped for is awareness of this corruption and humility about what can be achieved. The Tarnished who becomes Elden Lord or Cosmic Consort, while acknowledging the limitations and dangers of their position, might rule more wisely than one who believes they've achieved ultimate solutions. The endings collectively suggest that engagement with difficult questions is more valuable than possession of certain answers. The player who thoughtfully considers what each ending represents and makes a deliberate choice based on considered values has engaged more meaningfully with the game than one who simply picks whichever seems most appealing aesthetically or promises the most power. The process of thinking through these choices has value independent of which choice is ultimately made. Elden Ring's contribution to gaming and to broader cultural conversations about power, justice, and social organization lies in its willingness to present genuinely complex moral and political dilemmas without resolving them through authorial intervention. The game trusts players to think for themselves, to engage actively with difficult questions, and to accept responsibility for choices, even when those choices involve unavoidable costs. This trust represents a kind of respect for players that is relatively rare in mainstream gaming. Many games simplify moral choices into clear good and evil options, or present multiple endings that differ mainly in aesthetic rather than substance. Elden Ring refuses these simplifications, creating endings that are genuinely different in their philosophical implications, and refusing to declare any objectively correct. The emotional resonance of reaching an ending after dozens of hours of challenging gameplay adds weight to the philosophical choices involved. These aren't abstract thought experiments but decisions made in the context of a journey that has required real investment, struggle, and commitment. The ending you choose represents not just intellectual judgment but emotional investment in what you've experienced. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps thinking about the golden light of the Erdtree or the dark moon of Ranni's age, let these questions accompany you into dreams. What would you do with cosmic power? How would you address systemic injustice without perpetuating cycles of revenge? Can authority ever be exercised without becoming tyranny? What obligations do you owe to future generations? What kind of world is worth creating? And what costs are acceptable in creating it? These are not questions with easy answers, but they're questions worth asking. Elden Ring provides a space to explore them through fiction, experiencing consequences in a context where the stakes are imaginary but the moral and philosophical challenges are real. The value of such exploration extends beyond gaming into how we think about real-world questions of governance, justice, and social organization. The beauty of Elden Ring's narrative structure is that it remains open for continued reflection and reinterpretation. Each playthrough can explore different possibilities, and each player brings their own experiences and values to the interpretation of what they've seen. The conversation about what these endings mean, and which is best, continues among players, creating a community of engagement with shared texts but diverse interpretations. As our exploration concludes, the Tarnished remains standing at the foot of the Erdtree, the choice still ahead. In your own playthrough, you've perhaps made that choice already, or maybe you're still considering what path to take. Either way, the weight of that decision, the complexity of the choice, and the impossibility of perfect solutions remain. The lands between will endure, shaped by your choice but never fully defined by it. The cycles will continue, perhaps in new forms, perhaps ultimately unchanged despite your best efforts. Yet the attempt to shape a better world, even knowing its likely incompleteness, represents a form of hope that transcends the certainty of outcomes. We choose not because we can guarantee success, but because the alternative, passive acceptance of how things are, seems worse. Thank you for journeying with me through these endings, for contemplating these difficult questions, and for engaging thoughtfully with the profound narrative that From Software has crafted. May your rest be peaceful, your dreams filled with wonder rather than frenzy, and may you find in the morning that the questions explored tonight have enriched your understanding of both virtual worlds and the real one we all inhabit. The Elden Ring remains shattered and whole, fractured and restored, cursed and blessed, burned and renewed, all possibilities existing simultaneously until you make your choice and collapse the wave function of narrative potential into a single realized ending. Choose wisely or choose foolishly, but choose knowing that the choice itself, the act of engaging with these profound questions, matters as much as the outcome. Sleep well, Tarnished. The grace will guide you still, whether toward restoration, revolution, or dreams of distant stars. And when you wake, the lands between will be there, waiting patiently for your return, ready to reveal new secrets and old truths about power, responsibility, and the eternal human struggle to create meaning in a complex and often cruel world. The journey continues even in rest. The endings are not conclusions but beginnings, not final answers but opening questions. And perhaps that's the most profound truth Elden Ring offers. that the work of building better worlds is never finished, that each generation must make its own choices about fundamental questions, and that the uncertainty and difficulty of these choices is not something to be feared but embraced as the very condition of meaningful existence. May your dreams be gentle, your rest restorative, and your eventual return to the waking world be with renewed wisdom about what matters most and what kinds of worlds are worth fighting for.